If you heard a banshee scream, you would be terrified. You would stand still in fear. It's like the siren calling out to the ships at the sea. The banshee. What comes to your mind when you hear the word banshee? Well, ban meaning woman and she meaning fairy or spirit. So the banshee in Gaelic is known as a fairy woman. The banshee is also known for death. It is believed that if you heard a banshee, someone will soon die. Rather, someone in your village, someone you don't know, or you yourself. The banshee is also known for her screaming and her keening and her wailing. Some say her screaming is so loud that she could break your eardrum. Others tell a story of how they seen people's skulls crushing from the sound wave of a banshee's scream. Some say that when they saw the banshee, she came in the form of a young, beautiful woman. Others say that they seen the banshee crouched down like an old woman. But nearly everybody that's seen a banshee will tell you that she had fiery eyes, eyes so red, believed to be so red because of all the crying and lamenting that the banshee gives out through her screaming and her keening. Many people describe the banshee in different ways. Some of them they said she came as a form of a dog. Some of them said she came in form of an old person. Somebody claimed that they saw her flying over the moon. But the normal description of the banshee is that she had long hair, which she always combed, and she had this red eyes that you couldn't mistake the bright red eyes from crying. And, I remember being a child myself, and if we ever found a comb on the street with grey hair on it, we used to be afraid to pick it up because we always thought it was the banshee's comb. Sometimes she could be seen lamenting beneath trees or lamenting on the side of the road. Sometimes she's seen just standing, gazing into the mist of the night. This is another story from Duchas. Two men were returning from a visit one night when they saw a banshee sitting on a wall, combing her hair. The banshee disappeared when they came near, but she left the comb on the wall. One of the men took the comb. In the middle of the night, the banshee came to the window and asked the man for her comb. The man handed out the comb on a spade. The banshee, thinking the spade was the man's hand, broke it in two. The Duchas story that I picked was about a guy who wrote about his father, Thomas Burke, from Colesmanstown, Ballystowell, and his neighbour named Martin Gwynn. They were coming home from a public house in the neighbourhood one summer's evening about 10 years ago. As they cycled along, they heard keening down in the hills, as they thought in a neighbour's house named Murphy, where a man named Andy Murphy was very ill. They thought he must be dead, and that his sister, Judy, must be out crying. When my father went home, my grandmother sat him down to see how Andy Murphy was. When he went in, Julie was sitting by the fire on 2 sods of turf. My father inquired for Andy, and she said he was resting nicely. He asked her if she was crying outside. No, said she. Did you hear crying? Oh no, he said, but the hair stood on his head with fear. He rose up and ran all the way home. The next morning, Andy was dead. So all the neighbours said that it was the Banshee, Keenan the Murphy family. She always did when any of the family was about to die. Keenan would be a huge part in Irish culture, especially in wakes. So at a wake, you get the Keenan women that would come in and they'd cry, and they were professionals, so they'd cry out, and they'd be lamenting all through the night. So they could be crying for 6-7 hours, and then another crowd of keeners would come in and take over for the first lot. So this thing went on for the whole night. People screaming and crying and lamenting, and that's where the Banshee got the Keenan from. So the Keenan of the Keenan women, they would be associated with death. So when people heard the Banshees cry, straight away it would have brought them back to the Keeners, and that cry would be also associated with death. But then, so we're talking about the Banshee.
Right.
Have you any stories about the Banshee, or what do you know about the Banshee?
The only thing I know about the Banshee is that she lived in the bogs, and if you heard her late at night, you were doomed.
What about
Yeah.
yourself?
The Banshee lived down the road from us, very bad. Very bad was her name. And if we wouldn't go to sleep or do we were told, we'd just have the Banshee outside the window. What about the Gaelic one?
My father was scared. There was a big hole. I lived by the sea when I was growing up. There was a big hole west in the field, and it was water inside. And my father would not let us go west of the field. He said, "If you go west of Banshee, he'll get you."
And what would you associate with the Banshee with?
Dead. They say they all said it was dead.
It was the scream.
Yeah,
you
very
hear,
rotten noise.
yeah. But I think if there was a death in the family, and you lived out in the country, and especially in a valley, and if somebody was crying in pure grief, that's what we were hearing, because sound would travel. And of course, the minute we heard anything like that, that was it.
That was the Banshee.
That was the Banshee, yeah. Yeah.
Very good. Do you want to add any more, or?
No, not really.
Not really.
There was another story about it, that you didn't go near fairy rings because
Oh, yeah.
she lived there or near it or whatever. So fairy rings are another thing that you'd never go near.
And if you were plowing the field,
Oh, they wouldn't
they
touch
wouldn't
it.
touch the field.
No, no.
If they were plowing, they
Even
wouldn't.
today, they won't touch the
No,
fairy
they
rings.
won't touch the fairy rings today either.
Yeah,
No.
And the Banshee would be around the fairy rings.
that's the story. That she
Story.
kind of came from that. The fairies, the leprechauns. It's all very much connected,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah,
It is, yeah.
yeah.
So did any of you ever have any close encounters with the Banshee, or?
No.
But I remember my brother-in-law said the night his mother died that he heard the Banshee. That's true.
You heard something?
He heard something anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Because he was in the house and the mother was down in the college hospital.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And he said he knew his mother was dead because he heard the Banshee.
Banshee, yeah, that was the old tale.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Traditionally, it wasn't always bad to hear or to see a Banshee. And it was only families with O or Max in their names that could see or hear a banshee. But the banshee, before it became a bad omen, was actually known as a good thing. It was believed that it was somebody in your ancestry that would come back to help you past the death. So it was like a way of the banshee was known, like if you did hear or see a banshee, it was to prepare you for that. So it gave you time to kind of prepare yourself, and it was also believed that the banshee would help you pass to the other side, so it would direct you over to the other side. So every family had their own banshee assigned to their family, and it was only the O, if you had an O in your name or a Mac in your name, that you were only able to see or hear the banshee. The Banshee, 3rd of December 1937. The Banshee is still believed in without a doubt. I don't mean that every person believes in her, but a very great many do. I have endeavoured to get as many Banshee stories as possible, but I have discredited a lot of them as I do not rely significantly on the words of the person who says they saw the Banshee. The following story about the Banshee is perfectly and undoubtedly true. It comes from Mrs. Peter McKenna through her daughter, Mrs. Matterson. Mrs. McKenna had a sister who was dying, and one night they were sitting around the fire, bewailing. Mrs. McKenna was unmarried at the time and was very young. Her sister, who died, was only 18. As they sat in the fire, they heard a car passing by, and immediately afterwards they heard the most awful screams. They all jumped up and opened the door and looked out, thinking a child or someone had fallen out of the car. Her brother Johnny went out on the road, but the car had gone on and the screaming ceased. After waiting a considerable length, he returned to the house and shut the door. Immediately the crying and wailing and screaming started again, but this time quite close to the house. He went out again, but it ceased again. On returning again it began, and again, and the third time he went out. After that, it went around and around the house, getting worse and worse, and they at last knew it was the Banshee. No one was ever brave enough now to open the door or go out. It went on at intervals around the night. Towards morning, it seemed weaker and farther away, and finally ceased. The next day, the girl died.